I can't believe it. I said I was not going to look at Question Time. Then, of course, the clips appeared on Twitter, and there was a clip from Piers Morgan. And he totally said what politicians have been avoiding. Piers Morgan was asked how we could get back control of immigration and what the solutions were by one of the members in the audience. And Piers Morgan actually just came out and said, well, what about having another referendum? The elephant in the room, Brexit, exploded onto the BBC and across social media networks. And I have to hand it to Piers Morgan. Amazing, he actually said it. The truth is, we should have had a referendum in 2019, not a general election. But sadly, Jeremy Corbyn and Joe Swinson caved in and gave Boris Johnson the election that he wanted. And we all know what happened then. But really, Brexit in 2016 was totally undefined. And we should have had the opportunity to vote on it again once it was defined.
Piers, what's the solution?
Why don't we have another referendum about Brexit? Because I seem to remember when 2016 came around that we were told that there was going to be control of our borders and it was going to be economically beneficial to this country. And 8 years later, we have lost complete control of our borders, both legal and illegal immigration. And economically, it seems to have been a willful act of self-harm. And one of the main architects of Brexit is sitting here, who could have run to stand as a member of Parliament in this election, but has chosen not to because he wants to go and help Donald Trump be elected in America. But I would like to ask Nigel Farage, what objection would you have, given that all the polls now say the majority of this country would actually vote the other way if there was another referendum? What objection would you have to just testing that theory and allowing the British people to decide whether they were sold a complete pack of nonsense?
What would be lovely, to get back to the question.
Well, I've turned the sound off. You can't hear Nigel's reply because he didn't answer the question. He just banged on about the normal things that he goes on about, taking back control, which we all know was losing control. But we also know that Nigel was adamant that a result of 52-48 would be unfinished business, he said. But of course, that only meant if it was 52-48 to remain. And he's still now trying to push forward that he wants Brexit, but he wants you to believe that all of the repercussions of Brexit, all the downsides of Brexit, and goodness, there are so many, he wants people to believe that it's all somebody else's fault, and if he was in charge, of course, everything would be absolutely marvellous because only he knows how to do the right Brexit. The usual nonsense that we get. But it was also interesting this week that in the Telegraph, Patrick O'Flynn, another UKIPper, wrote an article headlined, "Labour have just let their true Brexit plans slip." And he actually refers to Brexit as the fragile flower, and that he believes it's at risk of a Labour majority government, and that really Labour have got plans to attack Brexit and take us back. He doesn't believe they'll do a referendum in the next Parliament, but he thinks there'll be salami slices to return Theresa May's deal, which I will remind you is still Brexit. But fascinating that they actually recognise that Brexit is fragile. And I believe that comes back to this reality that there was never a majority for Brexit. It was just, they were so loud and so pushing on it, and families were so split down the middle of it that people became worn out by it. However, now we're living with the reality of what Brexit has done, and it keeps coming up, and Question Time actually for the audience gives you a good temperature test. This one was in Lincolnshire. It wasn't in London, you know, and the audience was clearly on Piers Morgan's side, not on Nigel Farage's side. So I think we have turned a corner. And in addition to that, new polling has come out today from, it was commissioned by European Movement, which again confirms what Michael Heseltine has been saying, that people are ready now to start talking about Brexit, and we should be talking about Brexit in this election. So hats off to Piers Morgan. I don't always agree with him on other things, but on this occasion, hats off to Piers for actually saying what the politicians should be saying. In fact, we've got Ed Davey doing ridiculous stunts rather than actually saying we need to rejoin the European Union. He would have got a lot of attention for saying that, but he's decided to do these silly water stunts rather than actually talk about what we need to speak about. And it's very frustrating that we're having to go through an election which feels like a pin the tail on the donkey. But I do believe that Patrick O'Flynn's article is pretty correct. I do believe that the powers that have been handed to prime ministers now with Brexit means that it is fairly simple for the prime minister to go and amend trade agreements. As it is, the trade agreements this current government have actually negotiated have had no parliamentary oversight because of the Henry VIII powers giving ministers the ability to use statutory instruments to push through legislation. And, you know, the Conservatives should have always been aware that they weren't always going to be in power themselves forever. But if the Labour government uses this to actually sort out our relationship with Europe, we're all going to be so much better off.
I even dispute the fact that no one here is answering the question. So let's get back to that. Just for a moment, Nigel, I'm going to interrupt you.
Hard to believe it's only been just over a week since Rishi Sunak called the election, and so much has changed already. Goodness knows what it's going to be like in 5 weeks' time when we'll actually know the result of the election.
Mark, I think you need to read the room a bit. When you said that you've delivered for the country and that the economy's turned the corner, people around here laughed at you because no one is feeling it. You know, you take a walk now through Coventry city centre, it's changed. I mean, people having to choose between heating their homes and feeding their kids.
I'm glad we did it. So, right, do you want to vote? Yeah, I was just going to ask, why do you hate young people so much? You're making us go to the army, you're making us... No, you'll have a choice. You'll have a choice. I've volunteered all my life. And then you will love it. You will love it. Why do I have to do it again when I'm finally coming out of education? And then because I think that a culture of... I wouldn't do it like that. A culture of service is a good thing for our country. And you'll have a choice. You're waffling. You're waffling.